You know, we tend to think of World War I as ancient history, right? It's all black and white photos and dusty old textbooks. But what if I told you it's not really over? That the Great War is the reason our world looks the way it does today. In this explainer, we're going to trace it all back, all the way to a single gunshot that set the entire world on fire.
Just listen to this quote. "The lamps are going out all over Europe." Chilling, isn't it? That's what Britain's Foreign Secretary, Sir Edward Grey, said on the very brink of the war. And he wasn't just being dramatic. He knew this wasn't just another conflict. It was the end of an entire world, the end of an era. The lights were going out, and what was coming to replace them was, well, it was something much, much darker.
And that darkness, it all started right here. Sarajevo, June 28, 1914. This is the place. This is the day. An event happens here that lights a fuse, a long, winding fuse that would snake its way across all of Europe and lead to exactly the catastrophe he was talking about.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth does the assassination of one man lead to the deaths of 20 million soldiers? It sounds impossible. But here's the thing. The assassination wasn't the bomb. It was just the trigger. To really get what happened, we have to look at the bomb itself. A whole continent packed with decades of tension, just waiting for a spark. Okay, so let's start with that spark. The single fatal shot that got this whole tragic ball rolling. The target is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the massive Austro-Hungarian Empire. The assassins? They were Serbian nationalists, part of a secret society with a pretty menacing name, the Black Hand. Now the crazy part is, their first attempt was a total failure. A grenade goes off, but it misses the Archduke's car. You'd think that would be the end of it. But then, in this absolutely bizarre twist of fate, the Archduke's driver takes a wrong turn and stalls the car right in front of another one of the assassins, a young guy named Gavrilo Princip. This time, he doesn't miss. 2 shots later, the Archduke and his wife were dead.
But as dramatic as that moment was, remember, that was just the match. The real story. The reason it all mattered is that Europe at the time was basically a giant powder keg, just filled to the brim, waiting for something, anything to set it off.
And there were really 3 big explosives in that powder keg. First, you've got imperialism. Empires like Britain and France had gobbled up huge chunks of the world, and now a newly powerful Germany wanted its own place in the sun, too. That created some serious rivalries. Second, nationalism. This was a huge deal, almost like a religion, especially in the Balkans, where Serbian nationalism directly threatened the very existence of the multi-ethnic Austro-Hungarian Empire. And finally, and this is the really crucial one, a tangled, messy web of military alliances. They were supposed to keep the peace, but what they really created was a giant tripwire. One wrong move, and everybody gets pulled in.
And here's what that tripwire system looked like. You basically had 2 teams, 2 big armed camps staring each other down. On one side, you have the Triple Alliance, that's Germany and Austria-Hungary at its core. And on the other, the Triple Entente, France, Great Britain, and the massive Russian Empire. The deal was simple. If you attack my friend, you're attacking me. You can already see how this is going to go wrong.
And here's a wild piece of trivia that just adds to the tragedy of it all. The leaders of 3 of the main countries about to go to war, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, King George of Britain, and Tsar Nicholas of Russia, they were all first cousins. It was literally a family feud that was about to drag the entire planet into a war.
Okay, so the match has been lit. The powder keg is sizzling. Now just watch how fast the dominoes fall. Over the next month, in what's called the July Crisis, every attempt at diplomacy just makes things worse. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
It starts with Austria-Hungary. They go to their powerful ally, Germany, and get what's called a blank check. Basically, whatever you do to Serbia, we've got your back. So Austria-Hungary sends Serbia this totally outrageous list of demands, an ultimatum they know Serbia can't possibly accept. When Serbia, predictably, can agree to everything, bam, Austria-Hungary declares war. Well, that pulls in Russia, who sees itself as Serbia's big brother protector. So Russia starts mobilizing its gigantic army. Germany sees that and declares war on Russia, and then on Russia's ally, France. To get to France, Germany's plan is to march right through neutral Belgium, and that is the final straw. It brings in Great Britain, who had a treaty to protect Belgium. In just over a month, a local dispute becomes a world war.
And the price for this absolute catastrophic failure of diplomacy? A war on a scale no one had ever imagined. The final cost? 20 million dead. Just let that number sink in for a moment.
So when the fighting finally stopped,
The world was broken. It wasn't about just signing a treaty and going home. The old world order was completely shattered. The map of Europe, and even the Middle East, was about to be violently redrawn.
Just look at this. 4 massive, ancient empires that had dominated the world for centuries. The Russian, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the German empires, they just vanished. Poof, gone. And in the rubble, all these new countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, popped up, creating a whole new and very fragile political landscape basically overnight.
And while the old European powers were basically bleeding out, 2 new giants stepped onto the world stage. First, the United States. It came out of its shell, its isolation, and suddenly it's the world's biggest economic and military power. And at the same time, over in Russia, the war had sparked a revolution, giving birth to the Soviet Union, a brand new kind of power with a radical communist ideology that would basically set the stage for the rest of the 20th century.
But this is really important. The war's fallout didn't just stop in 1918, not even close. Its toxic legacy is something we are still dealing with today. And you can see that nowhere more clearly than in the Middle East.
See, while the war was still going on, the British and the French got together and made a secret backroom deal. It's called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and it was pure imperial arrogance. They literally took a map of the Ottoman Empire's Arab lands and just drew lines on it, deciding who would get what piece after the war. They gave zero thought to the people who actually lived there, to their history, their religions, or their ethnic groups.
And the results of that backroom deal? Well, they've been an absolute disaster. They created these artificial countries, like Iraq, mashing together groups that hated each other. They split up other groups, like the millions of Kurds, leaving them without a country, scattered across 4 new borders. And for the Arab people, it was a profound betrayal that has fueled decades of resentment against the West. So much of the instability and conflict we see in the Middle East today can be traced right back to these lines drawn on a map 100 years ago.
Now, out of all this horror, there was one glimmer of hope. People were so shocked by the slaughter that they said, okay, never again. And this led to a really big idea, the League of Nations. It was the world's first attempt at a global organization to keep the peace. Now, we all know it ultimately failed to stop World War II, but it was the blueprint, the first draft, for what would eventually become the United Nations.
You know, they called it the war to end all wars. It's a famous phrase. But when you look at everything that came out of it, the shattered empires, the new superpowers, the artificial borders in the Middle East that are still causing so much pain, you have to wonder, was it really the war that ended all wars? Or was it actually the war that started them all? The violent, bloody birth of the modern world we're still trying to navigate today.